I'm just going to keep looking at you. That's one of your lines, Laura, and I've learned to do that. A story from the Israel Folktale Archives, collected by Ziona Cohn from her father Abraham Mordechai Mizrahi, who was from Turkish Kurdistan. There once was an old man, 100 years old, who was very wealthy, and he lived in Syria. And he had sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters and great-grandsons and great-granddaughters. And one night, he had a dream. And in the dream, Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes, the miracle worker, appeared and said to the old man, "Go up to Zion, to Yerushalayim, the holy city, for that is your place there." The old man gathered his family together and told them about this dream and told them to prepare for the long journey to go up to Zion together with him. And his children were surprised, shocked. "But my father, why should we leave here? You know, wherever Jews have lived, it has never been a home for them. But here, for us, everything is good. What do we lack? You've spent your whole life working hard here. And you know that if when we leave this country, we would not be able to take all our monies and possessions with us because there are robbers and thieves along the way, and they'll demand ransom. And what will happen when we arrive in Zion if we have nothing with us? We don't even have a country there." But the old man was stubborn, and so the family began their preparations for that journey to go up to Zion. And yes, along the way, there were robbers and thieves, and the family had to give up all their monies and their possessions. And when they arrived in Zion, they only prayed that they would arrive in good health. And they went up to Tiberias, directly there, to the grave of Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes. And afterwards the family went out to find places to sleep. But the old man said, "I will stay here near this grave of Rabbi Meir. I will sleep here under the stars." They pleaded with their father not to stay there alone outdoors, but he was stubborn, and he said, "No, I will stay here." And he slept that night next to the grave of Rabbi Meir, the miracle worker. And the old man had a dream again. And this time, too, Rabbi Meir appeared in the dream and said to him, "You are a good man, and you have followed my instructions exactly. And so tell me what it is you need, for I will help you." And the old man said, "Rabbi Meir, we arrived with nothing because the robbers and thieves took all our monies and our possessions for ransom." And Rabbi Meir said to the old man, "Go and get a piece of garlic, shum, and plant it, and from that all your support will come." The old man and the family found a house and a piece of land, and he went and he got some garlic and he planted it. He planted the shum. And the garlic grew. And from that garlic came blessings, blessings without an ending. For anyone who picked that garlic sold it, and they got monies. And the old man became wealthy again. And the garlic grew and grew, and the old man was happy with his lot. He gave a great deal of money for tzedakah. And he took all of his monies and he hid it in his leaning stick. Nobody knew how much he had or where it was hidden. And years passed, and the old man grew to be 135 years old when he gave up his soul to his Creator. And that leaning stick, the leaning stick broke because it could not stand the sadness of the death of its owner. And in this way, the family found the fortune. And the family remained in Zion, and they lived there with great happiness. When Abraham Mordechai Mizrahi told this story to his daughter, he said, "You can see this is a true story about a man who yearned to live and die in Yerushalayim." And as you know, having heard this morning about the Israel Folktale Archives and the Folktales, this is a type of story called an ascension legend, an Aliyah dream story. And in these stories with the prophetic dream, it's usually the holy man, the miracle worker of that community. Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes for some, Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi for others. Dreams rooted in Israel. And perhaps the people I want to tell you about also had these dreams with Elijah the prophet appearing to them. For in the latter part of the 1800s, there was a cantor, a Chazan Shechet Moel, a cantor, a ritual slaughterer, and a circumciser. They used to come, the three together. Chazan Yosef and his wife Peril. And they had 5 sons and a daughter. They lived in Sapizishok, which is near Kovna Gubernia in Lithuania. But they yearned to go to Eretz Yisrael, to live there. Now, all their children went to America. By the early 1900s, they had all settled in America. And only one son, who was also a Chazan Shechet Moel, he was the only one of the children who followed in the footsteps of the father, in 1906 went to Holyoke, Massachusetts, with his wife and 5 children. And he too was an ardent Zionist, also dreaming and yearning to go live in Eretz Yisrael and to reunite with his parents there. And so Chazan Samuel sent his wife and children to Palestine, to Eretz Yisrael, where she had some relatives. And then he hoped, perhaps to make enough money, that he would go there and join his family and live in Eretz Yisrael. His dream would be fulfilled. And in 1909, one of the letters that Chazan Yosef sent to his son Samuel in Holyoke, Massachusetts, speaks of his yearning to go and live in Eretz Yisrael and to be reunited with his son. And this letter came just before Rosh Hashanah 1909, in the Hebrew year of 5669. And Chazan Yosef writes to his son, "To my beloved son, my friend, your dear letter we read with joy. We're very happy that you have received from your dear wife a good letter from Eretz Yisrael. And we await already a second letter from her when she arrives in Yerushalayim. We like very much to hear about the Holy Land, and it should already be for God to have pity on us to be able to come there in good health. We would consider ourselves fortunate. Dear son, you cannot even imagine your dear mother's love of Israel. In Sapizishok, there's nothing to live for, a city without people. My dear son, I'm already counting the minutes that it will come the good time to go to Eretz Yisrael, our holy land. But that dream of Chazan Yosef and Peril did not come to pass, because in January of 1910, just a few months after this letter, Yosef died of pneumonia at the age of 59. And the dream of Chazan Samuel to go and join his family in Palestine, in Eretz Yisrael, also did not become fulfilled. For whatever reason, he sent for his wife and children to return to America, where they remained. And 20 years passed, and Chazan Samuel, was a widower. And he was introduced to an immigrant woman who had arrived in New York just a few years earlier. And in that year of 1930, when they met, they fell in love, and they were married. And Samuel brought his bride, Dora, to New London, Connecticut, where Samuel was now the cantor and the sheched and the moel in that community. But he yearned to be in Eretz Yisrael. Everything he thought about and read about and talked about was Eretz Yisrael. And in the early 1930s, the Ahuza gave an opportunity for Americans to buy a piece of land in Eretz Yisrael. And so Samuel bought an orange orchard in Gan Yavne. And soon after that, I was born. For you see, Samuel and Dora were my parents. And Chazan Yosef and Peril were my grandparents, the grandmother after whom I am named. And one of my earliest memories was seeing a photograph of my father sitting on a donkey in front of his orange orchard in Gan Yavne, looking so happy and proud. He dreamed to build a little house there and live in his orange orchard. But that was not going to be, because my mother, Dora, had come to America from Vitebsk, Gubernia, White Russia, kissed the ground, and thank God that she had arrived in this land of freedom, this land of opportunity, and never would leave America, and she never did. But my father's heart was in Eretz Yisrael. I was about 8 years old. I began to take piano lessons. I would sit in the piano, this big black mahogany Marshall and Mendel upright piano. And as I would practice my piano, I would look up at the ceiling, and near the ceiling were two portraits, two pairs of eyes watching me, looking down at me, maybe watching over me. I knew they weren't my grandfather's, so when I asked my father, who were those two men, somber-looking men with their eyes on me? And he said, why, that's Theodor Herzl with the long black beard, and that's Chaim Weizmann, two of my father's heroes. And they became part of our family in honored places on our wall in our living room. Well, when I finished my graduate studies, I made plans with a girlfriend to go to Europe for the summer. But there was only one problem. I didn't have enough money. So I went over to New London, sat around the table, that big oak table with my mother's many tablecloths at the same time. And I told them about my plan, hoping they would understand why. And my father looked at me and said, Peninah, better go to Israel. I said, I don't want to go to Israel, Pa. I want to go to England and France and Italy and see all the artwork that I studied about in college, and Buckingham Palace and those medieval churches with those gorgeous stained glass windows. That's what I want to see. And my father looked and said, better to go to Israel. Israel is like your mama. There are mamas more beautiful than your mama, more fashionably dressed than your mama, more educated than your mama. But your mama is your mama. And so too with Israel. Yes, there are countries with big palaces and lots of museums and universities, but Israel is your mama. So I sat and I listened to my father. But that summer, I went to England, France, and Italy. It wasn't for another 3 years after I had married Irving Schram, and we were living in Paris, that we decided to go to Israel. We went on a Mediterranean cruise on a boat titled the Herzl. And I remember, like it was this morning, coming into the harbor of Haifa with the sun beginning to shine and Haifa rising out of the morning fog. And we were standing on that deck singing Hatikva. And as we were singing Hatikva, my eyes filled with tears. And I could feel my father and my grandfather and my grandmother standing with me and singing with me. And I did love being in Israel, but not enough to go and live there. And so when Irv and I returned to New York, we had our 2 children, Rebecca and Mordechai. And when Rebecca was at college, she decided to go for her junior year abroad to Hebrew University, where she met Dov Noy and so many other wonderful people. And she fell in love with Israel. And she also fell in love with a young man named Emil Zafrani, a Moroccan Israeli who had come to Israel with his parents and his brothers and sisters when Emil was 13 years old. He celebrated his bar mitzvah in Israel. And they had come to Israel because of a dream. In the 1950s, the king of Morocco, King Hassan II, had a dream. And in his dream, his dead father, the former king, appeared and said to his son, "Let the chickens out of the coop." Not understanding what this dream meant, the king of Morocco turned to somebody who could interpret dreams, a Jew, a rabbi, all the kings of Morocco were really good friends of the Jews. And so the rabbi said to the king, what your father wants is for you to allow the Jews to freely emigrate from Morocco to Israel. And that's what happened. And so in 1972, the Zafrani family left Marrakesh with all their monies and possessions, and they went and made aliyah and lived in Ashdod, where they still live. Now, 13 years later, this young bar mitzvah boy became a young man, and he met this American Rebecca Schram, and they fell in love. And so they were married. And now their 3 children were born in Israel: Doriel, Aaron, and Elon. I have 3 Sabra grandchildren. And you can imagine how often I do go to Israel, at least once a year. But one day I was talking with Rebecca and I said, why don't you and your whole family consider moving to America? I'm here and I'd love to have you nearer. And Rebecca looked at me and said, Mama, I said, I know. My father always dreamed of being in Israel, of living there. He yearned to go and to live on his orange orchard and to be in Israel. But my mama, I told her, but my mama came to America and blessed America and never left. And Rebecca again said, Mama, you fulfill your mother's dreams, but I'm fulfilling your father's dreams. And so these dreams, rooted in Israel, continue, because how could I argue with her?